I want to welcome this incredible group of leaders who are presenting on the panel, What's Ahead? Collective Action for Climate Justice. And we called it part one because we also are going to have another group of speakers on this topic after this panel. I want to thank you all for the important work and leadership that you're doing. Climate justice reminds us that this is not just a crisis of carbon, it's a crisis of exploitation. It demands that we center the leadership, wisdom, and sovereignty of frontline communities, Indigenous peoples, Black and Brown communities, workers, youth, and women. We have long been resisting the extractive systems that brought us to this point. It's these communities who have the most at stake, but also the most to teach the world about real solutions, resilience, and transformation. And as we discuss what lies ahead on the path to COP30 and beyond, this panel is about more than ideas. It's about action, the kind of bold collective action that builds power from the ground up, that holds governments and corporations accountable, and that insists on justice, not someday in the future, but right now. This work is becoming even more urgent in the context of a global rise in authoritarianism, as we've been talking about, where repressive governments are criminalizing dissent, attacking land defenders, rolling back environmental protections, and silencing movements for justice. These regimes are deepening the crisis while closing democratic space for those fighting to stop it. It's a stark reminder that climate justice cannot be separated from the struggle for democracy and human rights. The window for meaningful change is narrowing, but there's still time to choose a different future, one grounded in care, equity, and ecological balance. So on this panel, we are joined by powerful leaders who are doing the work, organizing, mobilizing, resisting, and reimagining. And together, we're going to explore how we build solidarity across borders and sectors, and how we ensure that climate solutions are not only effective, but also just. And let's be clear, we're not here only to manage the crisis. We're here to transform the systems that caused it. And this includes not only our fighting spirit, but our joy and our wild imaginings. So I invite all of that to this conversation. And with that, I'm really honored to introduce our esteemed speakers. We're going to be hearing from Colette Pichon-Battle, who is the Vision and Initiatives Partner for Taproot Earth. She's also a lawyer and climate justice activist from Turtle Island, the USA. Then we'll be hearing from Thilmeeza Hussain, who is the Director of United Nations Regional Commission's New York office, and she is from the Maldives. And then we'll be hearing from Galina Angarova. She is Buryat, and she is the Executive Director from SIRGE Coalition, and she is originally from Siberia. I will have to share also that unfortunately, a couple of our colleagues who were joining us from other regions in the world are not able to join us today. Errol Derangi and Victoria Pinheiro, which we send them our best, but just wanted to inform our audience. And we're just absolutely thrilled to have all of the speakers who are here with us today. And I would love to hand over the floor to my dear colleague and friend, Colette. You have the floor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Osprey, and thank you for your continued leadership in this space. I did get to catch some of this work. It's amazing. Thank you for all that you do. My name is Colette Pichon-Battle. I use she, her pronouns, and I bring greetings from the traditional territory of the Choctaw Nation on Turtle Island in the United States. And it's an honor to talk not only with such a great group of powerful people, but also to talk with a little bit of vision forward. So really thinking through where we are and what are the opportunities as we go forward. As many of you might remember, COP29 in Baku left civil society at best disappointed. And I think most of us felt quite betrayed by both the negotiators and the leaders of that agenda. The process and belief in that process was effectively eroded, especially at the civil society level. I remember hearing calls for whether we even need a COP, whether we even need the UN. And it was really sad, but also very valid points to hear at that time. if this body is not willing to listen to civil society and work on behalf of the planet, who will? In 2024, at the end of that year, we saw the hottest year on record officially was 2024. And so while we're wasting time bloviating and going around in circles on agendas, the scientific proof that the Earth is warming was brought to our attention, bringing 2024 as one of the hottest years on record globally. And it beat that record by a sizable margin. It also was a moment where we realized we were probably shooting past that 1.5 degrees Celsius mark, with some scientists saying we were going to go past it temporarily sooner than anticipated. And the IPCC continued to emphasize the need for immediate and transformative action globally, while the US, in the meantime, was pulling out of international agreements, including the Paris Agreement and other cooperative agreements that would help to advance the rights of people and the rights of the planet. And we've just finished the UNFCCC Intersessional and Bond, where, again, there was failure to make real advances on financial commitments. The global north continues to push false solutions rooted in markets, rooted in extraction, rooted in more domination. Dare I say, they're pushing the next round of enslavement and domination of the planet and its people. And we see a suppression of civil society voices and frontline voices, with fewer folks getting into these conversations, and even more and more oil lobbyists and corporate representatives having the main voice inside of these conversations. All of this is happening while there's a geopolitical backdrop of genocide in Gaza, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in South Sudan. All of this is happening with a rise of global authoritarianism. And we've already seen the first heat waves in the United States and Western Europe. Protests are happening around the world. And I offer my peace to Kenya as folks are fighting against repressive governments. The young people are being shot, and the force of that government coming down on its people is not only upsetting, but I think a shame. But I also think it's a telling point of what is to come globally. And so here we are in this moment of folks doing a lot of nothing, a lot of inaction, a lot of talking. We're still not clear on what we mean by just transition, global climate reparations, climate finance. We're moving in legal conversations with no definitions and not much advancement. But there is an opportunity to go forward as a movement. We just have to see it, and we have to see each other. So as we prepare for COP30 in Belém, Brazil, I would like to offer just a few things that we should take into consideration as a movement. And I just want to mention, we're going into COP in November. I am from the great state of Louisiana, and we are commemorating 20 years since Hurricane Katrina in August. Our goal, and our work is to galvanize the community into this global conversation. And I would implore all of you, with anniversaries, with moments where we can bring people together, to not only light them up, but to aim them in a particular direction that can move the movement forward. I think when we go to Berlin, we have to move with some strategic engagement around the negotiations. It's really time for us to advance the frontline definition of global climate reparations. In 2024, Nairobi last year, over 250 people from 37 countries met to develop the definition of global climate reparations so that it would stop being whittled down into just a synonym for a very small fund that is not being funded very well at all, but instead to have a more comprehensive approach to what we mean by global climate reparations, one small element of which is finance. So it's time for us to advance that definition of global climate reparations. And this is where I think we can start to see some strategic involvement when we can't get periods and points made in the text can we at least get an understanding and an agreement around what we're talking about when we use these words? And we need to advance the call for a just transition. This is what the ground is pushing. This is what we all need to push. And we're going to have to take one major step as we advance just transition. And that's point number 2, which is we're going to have to augment and align our communications. What do we mean by just transition? It's a mystery for some folks, and for others, a concept too big to chew. We're going to have to learn how to break this down. And we're going to have to break down and demystify these concepts that we're pushing for in a way that the public can join us in understanding and advancing. So we need to demystify to our communities what these terms mean. We need to coordinate our messaging that flanks the demands from the front lines in COP30. And those front lines are not just going to be in the UNFCCC. As we all know, there are mass mobilizations planned in Belém and across Brazil, and we need to be amplifying what the Global South is saying and who's saying it. And we need to shift our communications broader than to just the folks who are in charge of the negotiations. We need to create a new audience, and we need to create more pressure. We need to move our communications to bring in people, not to the negotiation room of Belém, but into the climate movement that is demanding way more than any of these agreements ever would. The audience, the globe, the people need to be demanding way more than these negotiations. And that's how we should be spending our time and energy building our communication strategy. The third thing I want to say, and this is really basic, except it's not, and we're kind of losing on this one. We actually have to practice building community. What I'm seeing in the climate space, and I've seen it for a long time, is a lot of really smart people who enjoy talking to themselves or to their colleagues. And what we need at this moment are those very smart people practicing something very new, which is building community outside of those walls in which we are most comfortable working. It's time for us to understand that being a little bit uncomfortable and building community is actually the antidote to this individualism, this isolation, this loneliness. And it sounds easy. Let's build community. But what I'm really saying is we have to learn new languages. We have to go sit with folks we wouldn't normally sit with. We have to invite people to dinner and breakfast and coffee, because the opportunity in Belém is not in the negotiation room, in my opinion. The opportunity in Belém is outside of those rooms, where those of us who are able to go are going to have the courage and ability to meet each other and walk away with a stronger web around this planet than we've had before. And finally, because it's WECAN, and I know I can say the truth to this audience, I will offer my item number 4 with love, respect, and honor. And that is, it's time for all of us to acknowledge this is not just a moment of politics. This is not just a moment of law. This is not just a moment of struggle. This is a moment of spiritual crisis. And for those of us who come from traditions and ethnicities that still practice ceremony and ritual, it is absolutely, and I mean absolutely, time for those of us who hold those cultural pieces to practice them and to bring them into this space now. I'm not just talking about wearing regalia. I'm not talking about just showing who we are. I'm saying it's time for us to engage in ceremony, where we put our collective intentions together and we aim them at the target that we all know we must take down. On November 16th, we'll be inviting folks to join us at a point on the Amazon River where the slave ships brought in more than 50,000 African slaves from the continent into Brazil. And we'll ask folks to join us in a water ritual, an indigenous water ritual, to acknowledge and start to repair what we know are the root causes of this climate crisis. Greenhouse gases, yes, but the philosophy of extraction, even more than that. So with that, I see, I think I might be at my time. And so I just want to say, we do have the ability to move here. And in fact, we have the duty to. I look forward to seeing all of you in Belém and after that, because we've got work to do and it's our time to get it done. Thank you so much, WECAN.
Thank you so much, Colette. Really appreciate all that you shared. And we're going to have a little bit of a discussion after everyone presents. And I'd love to come back to some of the points you made, which are just so deeply important around all of it, but around community and a spiritual crisis and an emotional crisis we're also facing, in addition to the climate crisis, because as we know, the climate crisis is a result of root causes, which I'm really glad that you are getting at as well. And with that, I'm really thrilled to bring in Thilmeeza Hussain. You have the floor, and it's so good to see you, Thilmeeza.
Thank you, Osprey. Good day, good afternoon, evening, morning, dear distinguished participants, colleagues, friends, and really fierce women leaders. I am truly honored to be a part of this global conversation. And let me first take a moment to express my deep appreciation to the organizers, our dear colleagues at the WECAN family, led by my dearest friend, fiercest champion of climate and women and climate justice, Osprey. Really, thank you for this incredibly difficult and great work that you are continuing to do on all our behalf. And so I would like to take a moment really to honor you, Osprey, and to thank you once again. So as I speak to you today, not only in my professional capacity, but also as a former diplomat, as a mother, as a daughter, as a sister, as an aunt, all these different roles that we women have, I think it's not just me, but a lot of my sisters around the world. It deepens our sense of urgency and responsibility around the enormous crisis that we are facing and the challenge that we are facing. The fight for climate justice is also a fight for the future of our children and for the well-being of our families and for the systems that protect our world. So, and there is no urgent time to raise the flag for climate justice than right now. And we heard from other panelists also in the previous panel making a case. And I think we are really living at a very difficult moment in the world. We are living through a time of profound global disruption. The world is grappling with escalating conflicts, displacement, widening digital and economic divides, and rising social injustice. But looming behind each of these challenges is the deepening climate crisis, and it's not waiting. And 2024, as you heard, the annual global average temperature exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, making it the hottest year in the 175-year observational record. So over the past 50 years, climate-related hazards have increased, and more than 2 million deaths and 4.3 trillion in economic losses globally. So climate change continues to be the threat multiplier that is accelerating inequality, eroding even the little gains that we have made, and disproportionately impacting the most marginalized, in particular women and girls. And women and girls, particularly in global south, are the hit hardest actually. So from all this displacement to food insecurity, we heard a little bit about it earlier in the other panel as well. Then also the increased unpaid care work, violence against women. I think we should remember all these challenges that add to what we are facing right now. And climate change deepens all these existing gender inequalities. And yet, when we look at funding, it's less than 10% of the available agricultural aid and less than 1% of the global climate finance that reaches grassroots women's organizations. This is not a funding gap. It's actually a gap in justice. It is a gap in justice. I would also urge all of you to try to engage in the not only in the climate processes that are upcoming, but also look at the Second World Social Summit to be held in Doha, apart from the road to COP30. I will talk a little bit about it later as well. So as we look at all these global processes coming up, I would like to gently reiterate the importance of preserving the multilateral space. This space is also under threat today. Climate justice cannot be achieved without multilateralism, because there's no single country that can address climate change alone, and there's no single government that can address climate change alone, or an institution that can solve this crisis alone. So multilateralism must be the platform for justice, solidarity, and shared leadership. And global agreements, the climate summits must reflect the realities. When we have these global agreements, it must reflect the realities of those most impacted, not only through statements, but through funding, decision-making power, and accountability. The recently adopted Pact for the Future at the UN General Assembly echoes this urgency, calling for bold environmental action and a renewed global commitment to a sustainable, just, and inclusive world. And above all, we must respect all the agreements we have adopted and hold governments accountable to these agreements that we have already adopted. We cannot bypass rule of law. Rule of law must be respected and it must be upheld. And we must all push for that and call for that. Rule of law must be upheld at all costs. Otherwise, we will never be able to achieve what we are doing in this multilateral space as global community. Today, I'm heading the New York office of the 5 regional economic commissions across the globe. The Economic Commissions for Africa, the Economic Commission for Europe, the Economic Commission for Latin America and Caribbean, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, and Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. Across the world, these 5 UN regional commissions are working closely with women-led organizations, indigenous groups, youth networks, and grassroots movements to ensure that policy frameworks and climate solutions are informed by those on the front lines. These partnerships are critical to shaping inclusive, justice-driven transitions that are rooted in lived experiences and local knowledge. I would urge all of you to look at the work that the commissions are doing in your respective regions and see how you can engage more with the work that they're doing. As such, the UN regional commissions, we are investing in women and girls as agents of transformative change. In Asia and Pacific, ESCAP recent policy paper, Advancing Gender Equality in Asia and the Pacific in the Context of Climate Change, underscores the urgent need for gender-responsive climate action and calls for a whole-of-government approach to mainstreaming gender in climate policy. In Latin America and Caribbean, ECLAC's roadmap for promotion of gender equity is Bolivian mining sector is advancing gender equity by addressing systemic inequalities and positioning women as active agents in sustainable development of the mining sector. And in Africa, through the African Climate Policy Center, its mission is to enable transition to climate resilient development in Africa through responsive policies, plans, and programs towards transformed economies, healthy ecosystems, and human well-being. So, and in Arab world, in the Arab states, initiatives like ESCOWA's regional gender mainstreaming programs are amplifying women's voices in national dialogues. So I want to talk a little bit about the path to COP. The path to COP30 must not end in Berlin. It must ignite new momentum across regions, communities, and movements. The United Nations collective message is clear. Every fraction of a degree of warming matters right now. The temperature milestones of 2024 are a call for supercharged climate ambition with justice at its core. So we must continue to be demanding to meet these goals. We must continue to demand to meet these goals and you're very right when you said we need to demand a lot more than what the negotiations are delivering. And we need to put as much pressure on the negotiations as we possibly can. The next round of national climate plans, NDCs, are due ahead of COP30. And it must be bold, inclusive, and grounded human rights and gender equality. And we must be pushing pressure on our national governments to ensure that the next round of NDCs are reaching the goals that are set and the targets that we have set for ourselves. This is the moment to strengthen and elevate the role of networks like WECAN and feminist climate movements who are already at the forefront of the policy advocacy. On the ground, projects and trainings for global climate justice, as governments shape the next wave of national climate plans and just transition strategies, I think organizations like WECAN must collectively call for, as you are already doing, for action and find ways to push governments to have more bolder, bold plans and targets that they are going to submit. And this is not about symbolic inclusion, and it must be, it is about structural injustice if we cannot have the voices of the grassroots included when we are reflected in the submissions that the national governments are going to be doing. Looking ahead, the UN is convening a series of critical global milestones. Such gatherings reflect the world's hope for leadership that can rise to the challenge. But I must again say, the UN's hope for leadership must be the civil society and the grassroots movements have an important role to play to push the multilateral organizations and national governments to have more bolder targets and ambitions. We have the 4th International Conference of Financing for Development next week in Spain, and I hope some of you will be there, and I hope some of you would be organizing outside the rooms and building alliances like Colette already mentioned, and putting more pressure on the governments and the organizations that are there, especially the negotiators. The World Social Summit on Social Development, the second World Summit on Social Development scheduled for November in Qatar, will offer a platform to address the root causes of inequalities and injustices. This is another opportunity as well, a milestone opportunity. The 3rd Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, LLDCs, taking place in August in Turkmenistan, will spotlight resilience building for those often left at the margins. The UN's recent ocean conference happened in France, and we saw some actions or around action for marine sustainability in frontline communities that were energized, which was really good. And in 2026, the UN Water Conference in UAE will offer a once-in-a-generation opportunity to prioritize water justice as a pillar of climate justice. Each of these moments is a building block in the architecture of a more just multilateralism. One that centers those on the front lines and delivers with courage and accountability and respect for rule of law. So I think we could take all these opportunities, all these milestones as engagement points where we collectively and continue to push for bolder actions than what the negotiations are able to deliver. And I can say, speaking from being a former negotiator and also being on the civil society side at a different point in my life, that when the civil society organizes and asks and organizes and mobilizes and puts the pressure on the negotiations that are happening behind the doors, it does make a difference and it does have an impact. And I don't think, and the asks, and I keep coming back to this because I think this is very important, and Colette, you raised this as well. We must keep demanding for bolder action than what the negotiations are delivering. Even when they deliver, we have consensus, lowest common denominator positions. We accept those positions, but that is not where we stop. We should continue to push for bigger targets, higher ambition, because right now there is no other, we don't have a planet B, and this is the only planet we have. And this is the moment that we need to really mobilize to be able to preserve this planet for future generations. I am not going to go into the details about the numbers and stats, and I'm sure all of you have heard so many times. And I know that this is a difficult system to navigate, but together we keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thil. It's so great to hear from you, and also really important your message, because I met Thilmeeza when she was in civil society and we were advocating together, and then she became a negotiator. And so it's really good to hear, both sides, and that it does have an impact, that when we do our advocacy work, that the folks on the other side are being influenced by us, and it's an important space to be in. And thank you for all of your comments, and we'll come back to you in the discussion session. But I wanted to now hand the floor to Galina. It's great to have you here and see you. You have the floor, Galina. Thank you.
Thank you, Sembena Fundutun Hudut. Thank you so much, Osprey and Ashley, and all of you who have poured your hearts and wisdom into this assembly. I had the privilege to listening some of the speakers in the previous panel and now this panel, and I'm really feeling honored to be part of it. As an indigenous woman from the Inuit nation of the Buryat people in Siberia, and as executive director of the SIRGE coalition, which stands for Securing Indigenous Peoples' Rights in the Green Economy, I come to you with a message. And the message is that there can be no climate justice without Indigenous people's rights. There can be no just transition if it continues to reproduce the same extractive systems. So we're living through a time of accelerating urgency. Many speakers have mentioned that today. Over 100 countries now have committed to tripling renewable energy technologies by 2030. This ambition is necessary to meet our climate targets. But it has also triggered this frantic race to mine for metals and minerals that are required for this so-called green energy transition. And these are lithium, cobalt, copper, and nickel. So on the other hand, a lot of these minerals under the guise of the green energy transition are now being used for the military uses. With 2 wars raging, one in Europe and one in the Middle East, and a number of smaller wars, many of the nation states are urgently restocking their military arsenals. So here's the truth. More than half of the mines, 54% of all transition mineral mines that are planned to feed the green energy transition are located either on or near Indigenous peoples' lands. And many of them are in ecosystems that serve as the lungs and life sources for our planet. And mining is never just about digging into the ground. It's never an isolated activity. It brings infrastructure, roads, trucks, ports, railroads, smelters, processing facilities. It also brings labor camps, pollution, diseases, respiratory issues, cancers, cardiovascular illnesses. But just as damaging are the social impacts: rising alcoholism, drug use, sexual violence, and the growing epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And because the bodies of Indigenous women are an extension of our sacred lands, we become the battleground, just as the land becomes the battleground for defense and our resistance. A lithium mine does not just scar a single location. It casts a shadow from the extraction site to every link in the supply chain, to the trucks, to the ports, and into the global markets. Yet again, the price is paid by our communities, while the benefits flow elsewhere. This is the reality that we're confronting at the SIRGE Coalition. We work across continents, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Arctic, across all 7 sociocultural regions where Indigenous peoples are, to secure the rights of Indigenous peoples in the face of these expanding threats. We have built and continue building a global platform to bring together mining-affected Indigenous communities to share tools, advocacy strategies, legal strategies, and healing practices. Absolutely critical. We are strengthening protocols to free, bright, informed consent. We provide holistic support through joint campaigns and small grants to communities for their own self-determined projects. We provide training for defenders and organize strategic interventions with investors, shareholders, end-user companies, government officials, and other stakeholders. And through all of this, we're anchoring our work in the principle of self-determination, not charity, not tokenism, but the fundamental right of Indigenous peoples to define our own economic, social, and cultural priorities. Despite all of this, everything that we're up against, this gives me hope. What gives me hope is that Indigenous peoples already hold the solutions. We care for most of the world's remaining biological diversity. Our land-based governance systems, our relationship to territory, our traditional ecological knowledge are not just relics of the past. They are blueprints for a sustainable future. The global movement for climate justice must uplift those solutions, not as just side projects or community engagement plans and in some aid requirements, right? But as central to climate strategy. So a few months ago, when I was in Indonesia, I was meeting with some of the community leaders resisting nickel mines in Indonesia. The elders told me, we're not against development, but development that destroys our forests, poisons our waters, and tears apart our families, that's not development, that's death. So that moment reminded me, we don't need to choose between progress and protection. We need to redefine what progress means. That redefinition must come from the wisdom of our elders. So looking ahead to COP30 in Belém, which will be held on Indigenous people's land, we have the opportunity to change the story. We must not let COP30 become yet another platform for greenwashing. We must demand that Indigenous people's rights are upheld in every climate policy, in every financial mechanism. We must push for a climate movement that sees our peoples not just vulnerable or victims, but as visionary and as leaders. We must also hold space for healing, for joy, for the spiritual dimension, as one of the speakers, Colette, mentioned. Climate justice isn't only policy. It's about reconnecting with each other and with the sacredness of life. What's ahead? What's ahead is us together. That's what gives me strength. It is knowing that we're not walking this path alone. We are a global constellation of communities, movements, and ancestors dreaming through us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Galina. Your words really touched me, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I wanted just to share, something you said at the beginning around the mining issue, and we don't want to just repeat the same extractive policies from the fossil fuel economy and then just shift them over to critical minerals for renewables. I know that's a big discussion, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing at SIRGE. And to let everyone know, in case you're just in the sessions today and we're not here earlier in the week, that we just released a report during this assembly around renewables and this very issue and what we see as an alternative. So maybe we'll put that link in the chat again because it deserves so much time and space. So I'm just putting the report there as a flag for people to go into that topic further because it's so huge. We don't want to continue the extractive economy. So I do have a question for each of you. We do have about 15 or so minutes. So we have time for each of you to have like around 5 minutes. And I really want to get into some things deeper that you all brought up. And you can take this where you want to go because there might be a point you wanted to make. So I'm just going to offer a question, but you can veer in any direction you want to go because, sometimes we're reflecting on what the others have said, and that's fine as well. Colette, because it is unusual to sort of get into these conversations that you brought up around community and spirituality and root causes. I wanted to sort of go a little bit further in that direction, if you would, around, what kind of strategies or ideas do you have about how we bridge worlds? So just as an example, when this is the thing that came just to the top of my mind, when we were working with a lot of Indigenous women and bringing them to meet with financial institutions, directly meeting face to face with banks, talking about what was happening in their territories, it was so important that we didn't just have all of our facts about the legal cases and the harms done ecologically and what were the violations to rights, all of which are absolutely critical. But I also know in those moments when the women were talking about their stories, how their families were being impacted, and bringing even prayer to the meeting, as awkward as that might have been in the middle of a business meeting, if you will, in a boardroom. But it created a different energy and an impact those things combined and interwoven together and bridging worlds of creating space for humanity. And, so often women are degraded for the fact of bringing our emotional, spiritual selves to this effort, when in fact it's the absence of those things that dehumanize these efforts and create more othering and non-belonging, if you will. And so I'd love to hear anything more you wanted to speak on that topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the courageous question, Osprey. I feel lots of ways about that question, by the way. First, I'll say as an African-American Southerner in the United States in a climate movement that is very Northeastern and very West Coast, the beginnings of my work 20 years ago in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, there was a lot of discomfort with the culture of the South, where prayer, where the things that we know to do before you gather to make big decisions, both in the Indigenous space and in the Black space, is to pray. And the complications of things like churches and organized religions and their impact on our people. These are complicated contradictions. And as someone who has benefited from the civil rights movement and understands the role of spirit and spirituality and prayer and faith inside of facing oppression, this is not an easy dance. But there became a point, and I used to, sometimes I would say a prayer, sometimes I wouldn't, sometimes I would be real general. Now I just say what I got to say, because at this point, I believe I need everyone who is in the same room that I'm in to call on whoever you believe in and whatever creator you understand. It is that point in the world right now where we need them all in the room. And for all of the discomfort that we have had to face for many years, if not hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's okay to have the boardroom a little uncomfortable and the people at least standing in some position of power. We cannot continue to go to these people on our knees, and we cannot be afraid to do what it is that we need to do. I will say we have to be careful because some folks take it to a performance level, and we don't need to perform for the boardroom. We need to conjure the energy that we need to do what we have to do, but it's not a performance. And we've got to be careful with that line because we don't want to devalue the traditions that many of us come with. We want to use them wisely and use them when and as necessary. We recently at Taproot Earth, the organization that I'm with, we recently took on the Vatican, believe it or not, with global climate reparations. You know, why not? Let's just start with the church. I mean, you've got the moral high ground here, and you're saying, you said, we didn't say, you would like to go into a year of Jubilee where you forgive debt, where you forgive sins, where you forgive all of this. And we said, we agree. I would like to encourage those of us who are in the climate justice movement to not always assume the adversarial position. We could solve the problems. The church has a mark that it wants to hit, and Taproot, along with folks from about 60 different countries, said, we would like you to hit that mark as well. In fact, you should cancel all debts to all nations that are giving any kind of remittances to the Vaticans. You should give the land back to all of the people that you've taken land from to become the world's largest landholder. And by the way, you should create a fund from 10%, the tithing percentage that many Christians believe in. You should tithe into a global fund to repair the damage you've done in the spirit of Jubilee and in the spirit of repair. There is no animosity or antagonism here. You say you want to hit a goal. Let's help you hit that goal. I think we bring these things to the table, and then we, with our dearest and most contrite hearts, pray to the Lord for the courage for the Vatican to do what it needs to do to achieve its goals. And we conjure all that we know to conjure, which is our belief and our faith and our commitment to this tradition to do the right thing in a moment that we will not get back on the planet. There's an opportunity, I think, with financial institutions, all of these corporations. I mean, there's like 1 million corporations who say they want to be sustainable. You know what? So we want you to be sustainable. So why don't you get with some of these indigenous folks on whatever land and territory you're working on? And like Galina said, make sure that all of your rules, laws, and guidelines give them and honor the power that they deserve on that land. I think we have to have the courage to pull in our power wherever it is. And I think we have to rethink our strategy to not always face off with the military tank, but instead to bring in the power of love and alignment and the prayers that we have into spaces where folks say they want to go. I just will close by saying we are doing a ritual. The reason I am inviting people to join us on November 16th in Berlin is because we are doing ceremony right now with the Nile, Mississippi, and the Amazon rivers, folks to come and gather water, and we're pulling the waters together. The last stop will be in Berlin at the place of the slave port, because we have repair to do. And we are not just doing ritual for folks to take, video phone coverage with. We're actually doing the ritual that is required to bring all of the peoples who have been impacted together, and for us to make a commitment to the one thing that we all know is life, which is the water, and to go forward together, not competing with each other, but in full cooperation and acknowledging what we must. Well, many people get nervous about ritual and ceremony, but for those of us for whom this is a natural state of affairs, and I'm shouting out most of the female identified people who hold a lot of this culture, it's our time to put it in play right now. It's what's going to save us. It's what's going to get us ready for the fight.
Ooh, thank you, Colette, so much. Beautiful and so powerful to hear all of your words. I love you taking on the Vatican. Yes. And And I'm loving hearing about what you're organizing for Balim, and I will be honored, and our team will be, to join you respectfully in that beautiful work. And thank you for your incredible leadership. Colette is a force of nature herself, as you can tell. We could probably, just listen to her for a couple of hours, as we could with Phil and Galina. Each of them hold such vast knowledge. But really, really thankful for your response. I'd like to turn to Thilmeeza and ask you, I really loved all of what you had to say. I just wanted to, we can only have time for a little bit here. So I wanted to pull out the piece about you mentioning, which is so dear to us right now, the rule of law. And that you mentioned that a few times, which right now, talk about something sacred. I'm clinging on to that. Where is the rule of law? And I wanted to ask you about your comment in terms of these multilateral spaces, agreements that are already in place that are violated every day, human rights, indigenous rights, every day. What can we do? I know it's a big question, but get at some of it, whatever you can, about accountability, about implementation, and this is the hard one, enforcement. What can happen with governments around these agreements, accountability, implementation, and enforcement?
Wow, it's a big question. I was actually prepared to answer the previous question, but so I actually want to go back to that a little bit, what Colette was talking about. But I think when you think about multilateralism, it is not that the United Nations or that the United Nations enforces this, right? It's a membership organization. So we have individual countries. And wherever you are in your own countries, especially in the global north, I would say, but also in global south, that we need to put pressure on our governments, on our respective governments, to ensure rule of law is respected, rule of law is upheld, the global commitments that we have made, these global agreements that we have in place already, as flawed as they may be, and not as ambitious as we would like it to be, but these are instruments that we already have in place and mechanisms we have in place. And we must protect these instruments and mechanisms and ensure that the enforcement happens. And for enforcement to happen, we should push our local governments, national governments, to adhere to these agreements, to uphold these agreements, to what they have committed, to deliver on these commitments. So we have to be relentless in pushing for that. And I would say, if rule of law is not upheld, if multilateralism is not protected, it is the most vulnerable that would suffer the most. It is the smallest countries that would suffer the most. So we cannot afford for this space to be eroded, because it's in the interest of the bigger countries. When the space does not exist, then they can just do whatever they want to do, and some still continue to do so. But that doesn't mean that that is the reason why we move away from the space that we have to hold sacred. And this is also the space that will be used to create more just world. And this is where I want to come in on critical minerals and justice. And I think, as Osprey, you mentioned, this is a very important topic, critical minerals. The exploitation of critical minerals that we have already seen, and it's going to accelerate. And I think when women share how extractive industries impact their families and communities, they bring essential truths that facts and figures alone cannot capture. These voices humanize policy debates. So bringing emotions, bringing prayers into financial or institutional meetings may feel unconventional, but it creates space for shared humanity. And that is transformative. It challenges the notion that rationality alone drives just decisions. It is not. The emotions, the energy is important and it matters. So when you look at the minerals like lithium, cobalt, and rare earths are in high demand now as the world decarbonizes. But we must ask, at what cost and to whom? We cannot replicate colonial patterns of extraction under the banner of climate justice or climate action. Justice means safeguarding the rights of communities, indigenous peoples, and future generations. So at the UN, the regional economic commissions are stepping up, and they are providing data analysis and policy advice on critical mineral governance, which is going to be so important, facilitating regional corporations to avoid a race to the bottom on environmental and social standards, elevating community-led perspectives to ensure local voices shape global decisions, especially around the governance of these important minerals, the conversation. And I think UN's role in critical mineral standard setting matters, and it is also important because we have to use this multilateral space to set standards. You cannot have different people setting standards that suits them the best. UN provides a trusted multilateral space for all countries, especially resource-rich developing nations, to shape fair and inclusive standards, to ensure that powerful actors do not dominate the agenda. And the standards that the UN sets can protect communities from weak regulations and environmental harm by encouraging right-based, transparent, and sustainable approaches across the value chain. And so I think, and also the UN, including the regional commissions, they bring local knowledge into global policy spaces, ensuring that community experience and regional priorities inform international norms. So I urge all of you to continue to be engaged in these spaces and continue to provide your knowledge and your insight, and bring your prayers and bring the energy to these spaces when we are negotiating. I think it is very, very important. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate Thil, and always your expertise and knowledge is so valuable to all of us. So I have a final question for you, Galina, and I'm so glad you could be here with us. In your remarks, you had mentioned, that we need a new definition of progress. And I wonder if you could take a little bit of time to open that up, because it's so important as we talk about what we don't want and really dismantling these systems of oppression. How are we building the world that we do want? And what, we don't have to start from scratch. There are a lot of models out there and a lot of knowledge from local communities, from frontline groups, from indigenous peoples, from Black and Brown communities already practicing other ways of being. But there's also, these different economic frameworks like we hear coming from Latin America of Buen Vivir, which is living well. This idea that progress and development is also about our well-being as human beings, our relationship to the land, the well-being of nature, our relationship to nature, our relationship to one another and community are all ways of progressing, our own creativity. There's all different kinds of ways we can grow. And I wonder if you could really close out our session by talking about this new definition of progress. Thank you so much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's a big question. Yeah, do I have an hour? But what I wanted to say is that any progress in my mind starts here and starts here. It's individual progress that challenges the status quo, that challenges those preconditioned structures that we have inherited within the system. Questioning every single time when you're thrown something that you are bound to respond to, but giving that moment, that pause between the stimulus and reaction, to me is progress. Do I have to react that way? Do I have to think that way? Can I actually think a completely different way? To me is progress. I just wanted to go back to spirituality and the role of ritual, because to me, this is the key component. I come from a culture where prayer, ceremony was a huge part of my culture. It's still a really important part of my culture. We say that nothing can stop 100 women gathering together and manifesting. And that's what I do believe in. And I hope I'm not sure I'm coming to Berlin, but if I'm there on November 16th, I'll come to the river and we can definitely manifest something. We can manifest a different world. And that's what the definition of progress is. A world that we can imagine and manifest together. I'm going to very quickly tell you a story to bring that point. Like many, many years ago, I worked to protect a beautiful territory in Western Siberia from a gas pipeline. And I engaged in a multi-layered, multi-pronged campaign through, targeting an IPO that was trying to raise the money for that pipeline, creating a specially protected area managed by indigenous peoples that the pipeline would go through, working with government officials, drafting a sacred sites law, finding those sacred sites and just creating passports for those sacred sites. So there were like probably a dozen of strategies that we tried to employ to protect that sacred land. But in the end, the shamans took me aside one day and said, Galina, I know what you're doing and we really, appreciate it, but you have to understand that the primary strategy that we have been employing all along is the ceremony. It's because of our prayers, our ancestors are hearing and supporting us through this journey. It's because of them that this land and this culture remains intact. So that's where I come from. And I do believe like this is the point. If we gather in ceremony and prayer together, that would initiate a new path, transformation, human transformation, but also that will manifest in a new story. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those good words of wisdom. And, I think it's one of the big things that, women in all of our diversity are bringing to the table. We know we have to do another way of living, another way of approaching this work, because the way that things have been developed and the systems that are in place did not carry the practices that you and Colette and Thil are talking about. And so this is what is part of the transformation. And I love that you're bringing that to the table. And I'm very happy our conversation wound its way here unexpectedly. I think it's wonderful. Thank you all so much for taking time with us and sharing your incredible wisdom and the powerful work you're doing in the world. We're here to support you. We've put all of your information in the chat for folks to know about it. And this is getting broadcast out into the world. And, I wish you all really well. Thank you so much and look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you.